Hi, everyone. Welcome to MTG Live. Now, usually I do this in Washington, D.C. or at home in Georgia in my district. But today I flew to Texas, not just any place in Texas, but the very birthplace of the oil industry, America's oil industry. And today I'm excited to bring to you someone you may not know, but you need to know him, Joe Penland. Everyone, this is Joe from Texas.
Thank you for coming. I really appreciate it.
Joe, thank you so much for having me. Now, the reason why I'm here to talk to you is because I ran across your website, joefromtexas.com, and I was really amazed at what you were saying and what you were doing. You're not someone that has to speak out about anything, really. You're enjoying your life, the success of your life, your family, your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, but you are speaking out. And I really want to bring all of our viewers on MTG Live your story, because Joe, I really think that your story is the American story, and it's what young people need to hear. It's what many Americans need to hear, and it's especially what the dummies in Washington, D.C. need to hear, because they've screwed up pretty bad.
I agree.
So here's where I want to get started. I really enjoyed talking with you and learning about your life. And your life in many ways is comparable to a lot of people's lives today. Here in our country, we're struggling with very high inflation for the first time in 40 years. It's record inflation. There are a lot of people that can't afford to buy groceries. They're having trouble paying their bills. They're having trouble buying medications, even possibly deciding between choosing to pay their rent or buy food. Now, that's not where America should be today, especially after our country was shut down from COVID-19 and so many businesses went out of business. The American dream is on the line, and it's not just on the line, it's being destroyed. And I believe it's being destroyed by the policies from Washington, D.C. But you grew up in a way that's relatable, I think, to a lot of young people today. Maybe kids growing up in cities where the only parent they have to depend on is maybe a mom, a single mom, or a dad, or maybe a grandmother. They may be growing up in a situation where they don't see a way out. And America's culture, TV, movie stars, social media is telling them the only way they can be successful is if they become a TikTok influencer or YouTube influencer and make millions of dollars like that. Or if they become an NBA or NFL superstar, then they're going to be a millionaire. Or perhaps even if they get a student loan and get hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt and get that college degree and come out of college making $45,000 a year. That's not going to cut it. But you have a story that is honestly the American story, and many people have lived this life that don't come out on television and talk about it, but there's many people like you that have a real story to tell. So can you share with everyone just a little bit about your childhood?
Yeah, I can. We started out in Frisco, Texas, and it was a cotton gin town. It had 900 people in the town, and that's all there was for industry there was farming. And once a year, the town would swell up by about 300 people. They would come from Mexico to help pick the cotton. And they let school out, and all the kids and all the families, men, women, and children, went to the cotton fields. And everybody just worked. So back in the 50s, everybody worked. I mean, you didn't have the things to distract children or family. A lot of families had lots of children to work on the farm or to help make ends meet. It was just a way of life. It was our culture that everybody was going to work every day. And we understood then that nothing was free in life. You were going to have to earn what you got. If you sat back on the sideline, you got left out. And there wasn't a lot of TV and all that going on where you've seen superstars and all the things that kids get to look at today. And it's harmed a lot of them, I believe. And what you said is right. There's only going to be a few make it to the very top. And so consequently, 95% or 98% of us are going to have to find a job. And you're better off if you can go ahead and get your life set, that you know you're going to work and you want to come home every day and know that you've earned what you have. Nobody gave it to you. And you take care of your family and your friends, and you take care of your country. And that's what we did.
Now, that is so true. And I know that to be true because that's what I've done my whole life too. And there's many, many Americans that know that's true also. except these Americans, they're not on television. They're not on the news every night trying to tell America how to think and feel and how to vote. These people have worked hard. They paid their taxes. They paid into Social Security. They're doing everything right, but the government is destroying their ability to survive right now. Now, Joe, your family didn't have a lot of money growing up. What can you tell me about what happened to your father and how did your mom help your family survive?
Well, back in Frisco, 1957, Dad had a massive stroke. Same time, a younger brother was in the hospital in Dallas. Dad was in McKinney at the VA hospital. John had open heart surgery, which was experimental in the 50s. So Mom had 3 little boys at the house, and her dad in one hospital, son in another hospital. Dad never recovered 100%, probably not even 50%. He had a couple more strokes after that, and he was pretty much paralyzed the rest of his life. Right at the end, he got to where he could walk a little bit with a couple of canes. So Mom couldn't get out and take a job. She had to take care of him. So she took in ironings, and she would iron people's clothes for a couple of dollars for a basket of clothes, or $1.50 or whatever. And we had to walk everywhere we went. We didn't have a car, and not many people had phones. But she took care of us. She was there. She loved us, and we went to school every day. We were clean. We were loved. And we just didn't have much. And it was just hard to make it. But she did without herself, obviously. We literally didn't have enough to eat, but she made things work. She didn't eat with us. She'd eat if we left anything. We found that out when we grew up. It's just a tough life. But in that town, you really had a chance because there was a lot of jobs for kids. It was just a farming town, and there was an old gentleman next door that did all kinds of odd jobs. And we got to work with him and make a few nickels or a quarter, and we just brought that home to help buy groceries. And that's how we survived.
But really, though, I mean, just to put it into perspective, to compare what it was like then for your mom, she was basically, even though she had your father, her husband, was at home and she was physically caring for him because he was no longer able. He just wasn't able after the strokes and everything. Your mother was trying to support the family when women didn't really have big careers. They didn't have equal pay like women do now. There weren't really opportunities there for women, but she was doing everything she could to make ends meet for your family. I mean, I can't imagine ironing clothes. That takes a long time just to make a couple of dollars a day. That is extremely difficult at the same time of caring for children and her husband. So that's something that people need to realize, is that was a difficult, extremely difficult life, day after day after day. But she didn't complain to you and your brothers, and she didn't complain about being hungry. You told me that she would eat the rest of the food on y'all's plates when you guys were finished eating, but you didn't know that was really her dinner. So, wow, your mom was an amazing woman.
Yeah, she was. Like I say, times we knew we had a hard time, but we didn't know it like Mom knew it. Mom really, she experienced it every day, every hour. No air conditioning, you're ironing clothes, the floor would literally be wet because she'd sweat, just ironing all day. It was miserable for her, but she didn't let us know it. She was always joyful to us and greet us, it was just unbelievable how loving she was. But
isn't that interesting, though, what that did for you and your brothers? You didn't have a mother. She was, of course, working hard and suffering, I'm sure, in many ways, but she still raised you with that love and hope of, we're just going to keep working. We're just going to keep doing everything we can to carry on. And I'm sure that instilled in you and your brothers a really good attitude and outlook in life, instead of listening to a mother constantly complain. And so I'm just really impressed with your mom that she was able to do that.
Yeah, she was, and she didn't complain. That's the key. But we knew it, so we worked. Mm-hmm. And we was happy to bring whatever few dollars or pennies we made home to her, because it was a group effort at that point.
Yeah.
And that's how we had to do it until we moved here in 1960.
Okay, now you moved here in 1960. How old were you?
10 years old.
10 years old. And I remember you were telling me in our conversation how before, when you lived in Frisco, people would give you a box of food and you would take it home, and it was food that was rotting in the grocery store. but your mom would cut the rotten parts off, and y'all probably didn't know the difference. But then when you moved here, what was different, and what was the difficulties there?
Well, yeah, we moved here. My grandmother came up on a bus,
Okay.
my mother's mother, and seen what was going on. And she told my mother, "You can't stay here. Kids, you can't do this by yourself. Can't get out and get a job. If you'll move to Nederland, where I actually started this business in her backyard, she had 1 acre. Said, I'll help you with your husband, and I'll help the boys, and you get out and get a real job." And my mother didn't want to do that. And it was in October, same time it is right now. And so she made the decision to move us, but she wanted to wait until the school year was out. And so we moved in May. And she borrowed $100 to pay a man to move us. And she worked ironing clothes and paid that out, $10 a month at the bank. Had to pay $110 back. She worked October through May, got that paid. So we moved here. We got here to my grandmother's house late that Saturday evening, and I noticed it smelled kind of funny because we never smelled a refinery. We was in a farming community.
Yeah.
And we got my dad to bed. We all helped get him to bed. And the old gentleman that moved us down here, he had a sleeping bag, and he was in the back of his truck. And there's a little 2-room house, little 2-room bedroom house, small. This room right here is bigger than her house was.
Wow.
And so I was standing there by the table with my mom and my grandmother, and there was a bowl of fruit on the table. And my grandmother asked me if I wanted some. And I said, I looked at my mom. She said, "You didn't ask. It's okay." And so I said, "Yes, ma'am, an apple." And I got the apple and I gave it to my mother, where she started crying. And first time I'd ever seen her cry. I heard her cry a lot of times. I never seen it. But I seen it that day. And my grandmother said, "What's wrong with you? Why are you crying?" She said, "He thinks I got to cut the bad off this apple."
Oh.
So you knew you was poor when you got here, because the next morning, the children all had bicycles and people were playing. They had all kinds of things that we never had. And there was no jobs. There was nothing for us to do. It was like we moved to a big city.
Oh,
and,
wow.
and so there was nothing here for us except go to school the miserable summer, then go to school. When you went to school, we was on the lunch program, so that was tough. Kids would make fun of it. Frisco, I guess, was all on the lunch program because nobody ever made fun of us there. It was just a different time, a different place. And it was just like, that was the most miserable. The 5th grade was the most miserable year I had in school.
So you moved to a new place where instead of everyone being poor, you and your brothers stood out because you were poor.
Yeah.
And you knew it probably for the first time in your life.
That's it.
But
we didn't know it in Frisco. Yes, ma'am. We didn't know that.
You felt it for the first time.
That's right.
Now, Joe, you told me about a summer, and a lot of kids go to summer camp, but you went to a different type of, it wasn't summer camp. You had to help your mom make some more money. And so was that after 5th grade? Was that the summer after 5th grade?
It was the summer after 5th grade. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So what opportunity came up, and what did you do that summer?
Well, we didn't have a phone, and the people that lived across the street was where my mother and my father would get phone calls if somebody back in Frisco had a problem. His brothers lived there. And Miss Sterling across the street hollered at my mom, told her she had a phone call. She went over there, and about 10 minutes later she came back. Mr. Crowder, the gentleman next door, who actually co-signed her $100 loan because she couldn't get it on her own, wanted to know if any of the boys wanted to come work the summer, that he'd send us a bus ticket and he would room and board us there at his house. He needed the help. He had had a hard time the summer we moved here because we was his help.
Oh.
And so I had 2 older brothers, and they just didn't like the idea too much. So I told my mother I would go. And she said, "Well, you're 10. I said, "No, I'm 11. Of course, I'd had a birthday a week before. And so she didn't want me to go, but after me persuading her, the next day, Western Union me a bus ticket to Nederland. I had a quarter and 2 sandwiches, and I went to Frisco.
Wow. 11 years old, and you told your mom, I'm 11 and I can go. And so you got on that bus and you went to Frisco to stay with a neighbor that you used to live by and helped. So tell us what happened those first weeks.
Well, the first few weeks we cut grass every day, and he swept the street and cleaned the bank out. He had a bunch of odd jobs. cleaned the old pool hall out. We just done a bunch of janitor type work. He didn't work on Sundays, and every Saturday night he'd let me call at Miss Sterling's house and talk to Mama at 8 o'clock for 5 minutes. And it was hard. I mean, you're 11 years old, never been away from home, never been away from my family. It was, you get homesick. I didn't even know what that was until then. But the second phone call, the second week, it was getting to where I just couldn't take it anymore. So I went in, and Mr. Crowder was listening to his radio, and I told he was kind of hard of hearing anyway. And I told him I wanted to go home, and he said, what was wrong? And I told him I was homesick, and he turned the radio down. He wanted to know who was sick. Your daddy's sick? I said, no. Your mama's sick? I said, no. He said, who's sick? I said, I am. He said, what's wrong with you? And I said, I'm homesick. He said, what does that mean? And I told him I missed my family, and I wanted to go home. And he said, well, okay, when you want to go? I said, I'd like to go tomorrow. He said, are you going to go home with no money? And I said, what do you mean? I've worked 2 weeks. He said, well, you have. He said, bus ticket up here, bus ticket back. I fed you for 2 weeks. He said, you're going to go home as a failure. You're going to do that with your mom? I said, and I looked at him, I thought, man, that can't be true. He said, you think about it tonight, you pray about it. He said, if you want to go to the bus station tomorrow, I'll take you. So that night was pretty tough. Next morning I was hurt, but then I got angry, and then I got hurt again. So the whole night I wanted to make sure I was up before him. And I was up, and I was eating some cereal when he come in there, and he said, well, what's it going to be? I said, I'm going to stay. He said, I knew you would.
So Joe, I would imagine at 11 years old, and you had that conversation with him, and he explained to you that you were basically in debt to him because he was paying for a bus ticket for you to be there. He was going to pay for a bus ticket for you to go home. And then he laid out the cost of you being there. And he explained to you that he described it going home as a failure, but you understood it as I can't fail my mom, I can't fail my brothers, I can't fail my family, but you couldn't fail yourself either.
That's it.
That is such a powerful lesson at 11 years old. And so you chose to stay. Now, what else happened that summer?
Well, we continued cutting the grass and all that, and about maybe the 4th week, he told me to go to the shed after my cereal that morning. I said, get a pick and a spade and a sharpshooter. And I asked him what a sharpshooter was. He said, it's a real skinny shovel. You'll recognize it. So I went and got him. I put him in the truck. He said, we're not cutting grass today. He said, we've got to go dig a grave. I thought, well, that's a different deal. And I wasn't really didn't bother me at that point. We're not cutting grass today. I'm going to go dig a grave. So we went to this cemetery, and I've been back to it several times just because when we go to Frisco, just go visit the old country cemeteries. And him and the old caretaker, they scribed on the ground, marked the ground where the grave needed to be, and we started digging on this grave. And that's what we had, was a couple of picks and a shovel and a sharpshooter. He always kept another pick in the truck. And so after a few hours, he would get down there and dig around in it and cut the edges and everything, and he'd let me down in the hole. And he had a 2-gallon bucket with a rope, and he'd pull the dirt out of the hole. And after, a few hours of doing that and on back and forth, he had this little ladder that had 2 rungs on it that he had made a kind of a makeshift ladder to help him get in and out. He was kind of a pot-bellied guy, a little older guy, but just hard work. That's all he ever knew. And after a few hours, I looked around and I couldn't see out because I'm below ground level. So then that gets a little...
Well, you were 11.
Yeah, that gets a little
you
worrisome.
You were digging down in the ground.
That gets a little worrisome. So I didn't notice it, and I kind of got scared about that. But he'd say, well, get in the bucket. And I'd put my foot in the bucket, and he'd take me out of the hole and let me get some air. So that went on for several hours. And we got it dug, and I think the funeral was about 2 or 3 o'clock that afternoon. And I had to eat a sandwich. And then whenever they put a pine box down in the hole, and they put the casket down in the hole, and the caretaker and Mr. Crowder put the lid on it, and they nailed the lid down. He said, okay, let's fill the hole up. Well, the first shovel, when the dirt hit the top of the casket, it made such a sound, made me sick. And so he told me to go sit behind the shed, so I did. And him and the caretaker finished filling the hole up. So I was hoping and praying every day after that we wouldn't do that again.
Now, hold on. So tell everyone, what was his job? you were digging a grave because he was
He was kind of he was a grave digger
he
for
was
Frisco.
a grave digger. So this wasn't a rich man you were working for.
No, he's very poor.
He was a poor man too.
Yeah.
And so you probably learned a very powerful lesson that day. Number one, it's hard to dig a grave, but number two, the finality that made you sick, because I'm sure when you heard that dirt hit the top of that wooden box, that was the finality of that was someone's life.
That was somebody.
That was somebody, and you were burying that
Yes.
person.
Yeah.
That's a powerful thing. That is a heavy lesson at 11 years old.
And you know, when we left there, you know, nobody had air conditioning, so we had the window down. I started kind of getting, the nausea was going away, and I was feeling better and all that. And he said, "You gonna be all right?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "I know it's tough the first time." He said, "I think I did the same thing." And I said, "Well, you know, that kind of made me feel a little better, you know." So we worked for another month or so, and every night I'd pray, "Please, let's don't do that again." Mm-hmm. And sure enough, about a month went by, and he says, "Get a spade, get a pick, get a sharpshooter." That one wasn't any easier, except I just knew what to expect.
Yeah.
You know, and so that's only two. I only had two that whole summer. So you get some hard lessons, and that's what tempers a person for life. That's what tempers metal when you're making a knife or something like that. That's what you're made of, and you can take it and you can make something out of it, or you can use it as an excuse. And what I got out of that is what you see here today.
Now, tell everybody, when you got back home, now he didn't pay you every week when you were out there working that whole summer, but what were you able to take back to your mother when you took that bus ride back home?
$42.
$42.
He paid me $3.50 a week. He paid me 50 cents a day in room and board, and he paid me Sunday, and I didn't have to work. And I brought it all home to Mama, and she bought some school clothes for me and my younger brother. 3 pair of blue jeans, some socks, and some underwear, and 5 colored t-shirts. And he'd wear one day, and I'd wear one day, and everybody thought we each had 5 shirts. And that's how we started school.
So you take turns wearing the different colored shirts. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
And you didn't keep any of that money, but you gave it to your mom.
She got it all.
So Joe, after that summer, I imagine you finished up high school. You told me you didn't go to college, but you went to work, and life changed, didn't it? Can you tell us a little bit about the career and the company that you built?
Yes, ma'am. I got out of school in '68. I went to work in a shipyard as a shipfitter helper, and I put an application in the ironworkers local. It was a union local, and I got accepted there, and I went to there and kind of went through their apprentice program and started, when I got my journeyman ironworkers book, I started hanging iron. I traveled around hanging iron on bridges and buildings and trying to make a living. I'd gotten married real early, had 2 little boys. I had first son when I was 19, second when I was 20, and I figured that out, so I kind of backed off that just a little bit. And worked every day, and that was okay. Mama was doing good. You know, I was able to help her a lot, and my other brothers were too. And she wasn't ironing clothes for people anymore, so her boys that grew up, and she was getting a little bit, you know, of the benefit of having kids that were grown. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, everything was going good, and then life took a little bit of a turn, and I ended up with a divorce. Mm-hmm. And so I got out of that, and then I had to move back to my mother. I lost the house, and she got the house, and everything, and the kids stayed there. So now I'm back at Mama's house, back where we came to in 1960 in the backyard. So it was raining a lot on a lot of the jobs, and we'd lose time because the work would shut down. It'd be muddy, and you couldn't work. And I figured out a way that if we had something to put the equipment on, we could work right after the rain. So I came up with an idea in 1974. And I borrowed $2,750, and I built 10 mats in my mother and my grandmother's backyard. I rented them to this company I was working for, and that ended up being successful. And I built a few more, and I would iron work during the day and work in the backyard on the weekend. My brothers helped me back there, and another gentleman helped me. And we actually kind of partnered together. And then after a short period of time, he had a wife, and a very loving wife. She's a wonderful person. But I didn't like the 3-headed meeting. I thought it was better just 2. And then so they took half the mats, and I took my half. We had 42 at the time. And now we sell millions of mats every year worldwide coming from that backyard. And it's not It's not something that happened overnight. We went through some hard times because we started in 1974, and that's the worst time in inflation up until now, and actually it was worse then. And it went on for many years, and everybody expected 9, 10 to 12% inflation every year.
Now let's hold on there for a second. So think about this: 1974, that was Nixon, that was Watergate. Inflation was starting up. I mean, we had all kinds of issues in this country, very similar to what we're having today in America. And you fell on a hard time in your life, went back to your family, which is so wonderful. You have a supportive mom. You went back there, but instead of moping and sitting on the sofa and trying to figure out what am I going to do or feeling sorry for yourself, you had an idea that came from your experience every day in work is you can't put heavy equipment on soft ground or muddy ground because that just causes more problems. You created something, a mat. Now, when you first told me about the mat, I couldn't visualize what you were talking about, but this mat was made of wood, and you built something out of an idea from experience you had at work, and you created mats that heavy equipment could sit on, and the jobs could continue going. Nothing was slowed down because of those mats. Those mats were like a foundation for the work that was being done. Is that right?
That's correct. You know, when I was working for American Bridge, hanging iron, they had some real big mats. They were like 36 foot long. They never worked their equipment without mats. But the jobs around here, they didn't do that. And for some reason, so I brought that idea back. People here wouldn't, when it rained, they just quit. They would quit.
Sure.
And so I built some mats, and they was a little bit smaller than that because the crane we were going to put them on didn't require that big a mat. And then that just kind of caught on. And we just, every dollar I could make, I would buy more timbers and I'd build more mats, and I'd iron work during the day and work on the weekend. And back then you had a pager, and my mama would page me on the job if a call came in, and I'd come in and go load 4 mats and deliver them out on the job. And that's how it got started. And I stayed in our backyard about 1.5 years until I hired the young man that works for me still today. So I doubled the workforce. It went from 1 to 2. And Terry still works for me now, and he runs our entire operation.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's really incredible. Now, what are these mats made of?
They're made out of oak.
They're made out of oak, and are they made in any other country, or do you make them here in Texas?
Well, we make all our mats here. Mats are now made all over the country, and in the latter 70s, the oil field industry used to lay all the locations, especially in this part of the country, was what they called a board road. And that was a road that was made out of loose lumber, 2x8s, like you might see a deck at somebody's house. And they would lay layers north and south and then east and west until they got the desired strength and nail it together and do it all manually. And I looked at that for a while, and I figured out I could do that prefabricated. And so I came up with the idea to start doing that. And me and Terry built a bunch of mats at the yard. And by then I'd moved away from Mama's yard out on the highway. The business was growing, and the neighbors was complaining about trucks coming up and down the road and everything. So we got out of there, and we made these mats, and I finally got them where I thought they would hold up. And I filed for a patent in 1981 on this process, and we started nobody wanted to lay them because everybody was laying it the other way. So I ended up having to buy a company that built drilling locations for the oil companies to introduce the mat in the oil field, and now it's used worldwide.
And this is Quality Mat Company, launched right out of your mother's backyard after another hard time in life. But you really just went to work. That is a beautiful story.
Thank you.
That's what people need to know how to do. You work your way out. You work your way out of whether you're poor, whether you're down, whether life is hard, no matter the circumstances, you work your way out of it. And that's what you did, Joe. This is what's lost in America. People don't understand that. It's not, the government can't solve your problems. No stimulus check can solve your problems. You can't fix your problems on social media. The TV's not going to solve your problems, but if you just get up and go to work, you can fix your problems and be successful. That's the American dream.
It absolutely is the American dream, and we've lived it.
Now, Joe, Quality Mat Company is, as far as we know, America's oldest and one of the largest suppliers for mats. for large equipment, all kinds of job sites. You do everything from building out flooring for huge venues, sports, concerts. You provide flooring for many of the tents that hold migrants or illegal immigrants that come across our border. But your biggest customer that you have is America's oil industry and those companies. So can you tell me a little bit about what you think about America's energy independence and American oil?
Well, it's definitely in jeopardy today. You know, I've seen the rig count to 4,500. That's rigs drilling, land-based rigs drilling in the United States. We're down to 700 right now. So it just tells you how many jobs that could be. It's tens of thousands of jobs. And the bad part about that, you know, it's one of our best customers, obviously. And so I'm not just doing this because but sure. The oil industry is crippled right now. You know, we're dependent on oil from other countries, and that's a dangerous situation to be. Anytime you depend on somebody else, you're looking for trouble, and trouble's going to find you. You know, we're losing millions of jobs because that oil is being produced overseas. That's what's happening to us every day. People don't understand how many jobs it takes to drill a well from start to finish and get that oil to a refinery. Refinery's in the same place, whether it came in a pipeline or it came in a truck or a super tanker pulls up to the dock. When a super tanker pulls up to the dock with 2 million barrels of oil,
from another country,
Exxon or
right.
Valero or Motiva, they wrote OPEC a check, Saudi a check for a couple of $2 billion for that oil. And we send a pilot out with a small boat to bring that tanker in because they don't know our channels. So that's a man driving the little boat out there and a man driving the big boat back. Then you have 4 or 5 people that's going to attend to that ship when he gets there. We're going to tie it up to the dock. A few people are going to hook up hoses. In a day and a half, we're going to unload 2 million barrels of oil. And that's all the jobs we got for 2 million barrels of oil. The refineries
how many American jobs is that to bring in that foreign oil?
That would have been literally thousands of American jobs.
That would have been, but instead it was 6 or 8.
6 or 8.
Because 6 or 8 American jobs compared to thousands.
That's right. And you know, the thing about the American oil wells is they don't produce the oil that's in Saudi Arabia. We have to hunt for oil here for a 500 barrel a day well or 1,000 barrel well. Saudi Arabia, the wells come in at multiple thousands every day in giant reserves. So they can turn it up. They're not running at full capacity. We are. We're running at full capacity. That's why we're buying oil from them. And they're reaping that benefit. And they can run the price up or they can run it down. All they have to do is flood more oil to the market and the price here falls. Cut the spigot back and the price goes up. They're manipulating the price of oil and we're sitting back doing nothing about it when we taught the world how to drill for oil.
And we also paid for their infrastructure, didn't we?
Absolutely. And we defend our military defends foreign oil fields because we don't have it here.
And then who gets the profits?
Yes. The Saudi Arabia, the OPEC. It's 13 nations that band together. And they pride themselves on getting together and setting the price. You do that, or me and you talk about setting the price on anything, then they'd lock me and you up in this country. But they do that, and we know it. The oil companies here work independently from everyone because they can't get together and set the price. But over there, they manipulate the world price of oil. We have the ability in this country to drill for oil and natural gas in this country, and we can roll the price back on what they're charging right now because we have the reserves. We just got to go get it.
You're absolutely right. This America Last government has sold us out, and you just explained why. That makes me so upset. This is what people don't know. People don't realize this. They don't understand it. And they need to understand that there is no reason for any of our suffering here. We have no lack of jobs. We have no lack of ability. We have no lack of know-how. We lack a government that supports the American people.
You're right. And you know, when you buy something from somebody else and you unload it out of a container and you put it on the shelf and then you deliver it to somebody's house or they take it off the shelf, no matter what that was, that's 1 or 2 jobs. But there's hundreds of jobs when somebody grows a tree, mills that lumber, dries it out, builds a piece of furniture, finishes it, puts upholstery on it and gets it to us. Look how many jobs that was. And then we'll sell that one chair. I mean, it doesn't even make any sense. We've become a service country. We want to serve people at a restaurant. We want to serve them at the hospital. That's all we do. We don't build anything. If you don't manufacture something, a country can't survive just serving somebody else's goods. You better make something on your own.
That's right. Joe, I want to be a big part of turning that around. The whole reason why I ran for Congress is because I got fed up with all of this too. The only people I know in my life are regular people. People just like you and all the wonderful people that work at your company and all of your employees, all of your customers. They're Americans just like we are, and we have to fix it. Now, Joe, you just explained the serious issues that we're facing, not only with America's energy, our oil industry, our job crisis that we have in America, how we're dependent on foreign oil, and it's all because of our failed leaders in Washington, D.C. and the federal government. They've put us all in this situation. Now, the reason why I came to visit you today is because of your website, joefromtexas.com. And not only do you talk about energy, you talk about oil, you talk about many other issues. But my one question for you is, why are you doing this?
Well, I have been blessed, obviously, and at 72 years old, this election is the most important one I've ever seen. This country is so far off track of where I've seen it before, many times, under lots of different administrations. This is just the worst administration ever. And this country is in a bad way and going to continue to get worse. We'll have the same president, unfortunately, next week. If we change the House and the Senate, then we're going to hold him back for 2 years till we can get the next president in there to straighten things out. So I just said, I can't just sit back and take care of my family and my employees here. I can't reach everybody financially, but maybe I can reach enough voters that we can change the pace of this country. And that's why I'm doing it, because everything's at stake now. Everything I work for, all the people that's lived the American dream, and all the people that died for this country to give us the right to be here, it's all at jeopardy right now. And people can fool themselves if they don't believe it, but I can promise you, it's coming, and I can see it.
You're right, Joe. You're absolutely right. I've been saying that if we look at a clock, where are we? What time is it on the clock? And it's 11:59. We're over $31 trillion in debt. Americans' credit card debt is nearly $1 trillion. We're in a recession, whether anybody likes to admit it or not. We're on the verge of an economic crisis, and we have Washington, D.C. being led by fools that continue down. They'd rather defend other countries' borders than defend our own border. They would rather buy other countries' oil than drill for our own oil. They would rather care about anybody and everyone else than the American people. And they are failing. Now, I think we have a lot. We're about to lose everything. So you have joefromtexas.com because you felt like it's time to speak out. But don't you think that's the case for many Americans? I think it's common for people in your generation, people in my generation, just to stay silent. They don't want to rock the boat. It's uncomfortable to argue with people, maybe their friends or neighbors, people they work with, people at church. They don't want to argue. Many people spin politics into being about people's identity, but nothing we're talking about today is about your skin color, your religion, or anything else. It's literally about all of us together in our country being able to survive and having a future. What is your message for people? What are you wanting people to do?
Well, you have to help yourself. And what we have right now, we have the power of the vote. Mm-hmm. You know things are wrong. Whenever you know something's wrong, like the human body. Mm-hmm. When you don't feel right, and you go to the doctor and they check you out. And one time I went to the doctor, and God forbid anybody ever get this, but I had the C problem. Nobody wants to talk about that. I had cancer. Mm-hmm. Very first thing you want to do is take that out. You want to get it out as quick as you can. And if they tell you a family member's got that, I experienced that too. You want it out twice as fast out of your family member. You're smart enough to correct what's wrong with your body. There's a cancer eating on this country right now, and it's in Washington, and you got to get it out, or this country's going to go down. It's just that simple.
That's right. We got to get the cancer out of Washington, D.C.
That's right.
Turn it back for our people.
That's exactly right.
I love it. Thank you so much, Joe. Listen, everybody, if you are able to share this video, let your friends, your family, everyone you know exactly Joe's message, because Joe is speaking the truth. Joe has nothing to gain from this. He's not running for office. He's not trying to make money. He doesn't want to be famous. As a matter of fact, Joe has lived the greatest life, and he's very happy with it. But Joe wants all of us to get involved and do our part. So please go to joefromtexas.com. It's joefromtexas.com. Share his website with your friends. Have those conversations. Explain it to your children. And most importantly, make sure you're voting on November 8th, because it is very, very, very important. We have to save America, because America is all of our home. Thank you so much, Joe.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it.
Thanks for coming. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.